Here we
In
go.
5, 4, 3, 2.
We're live. It worked this time.
We did it like magic.
Oh, Lord have
and
mercy.
We're back.
It's funny because it didn't work last time.
It didn't. And there was much sadness. Actually, I would say there was more anger.
Oh. And furious anger.
There was a lot of like, what? Why is this? Why can't we? What the?
There was much weeping and gnashing of teeth.
There was so many teeth being gnashed. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. Get a mouth guard, people, because
this one's going to be a gnasher.
Oh, man. Christ is risen.
Truly, he is risen. Truly, truly, truly.
How you doing?
Doing all right, man. How was your Pascha?
Now it seems like it was so long ago because when we originally wanted to do this episode, it was during Bright Week and it was fresh. It was during Bright Week.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are a week later because YouTube was not cooperative with us last week. But
YouTubes,
all of the tubes,
my tubes.
Sorry, I'm setting up the thumbnail and everything too. No, Pascha was good. Pascha was this like Holy Week, I think for me started off like on a little bit of a rough start, to be totally honest. I felt like I had a lot of just stickiness and pressures and whatever, but God is good. And he gave me some much needed consolation. And just like, as Holy Week went on and I drew closer to the resurrection, it was like, oh man, this is like water on a dry heart. It was good. It was good. So that was good. And then for the last couple of days, I've been, I took a couple of days off, just came back to do this and 3 Men later. So I've a little bit of a water on a dry psyche, which is just burnt out. So,
get a job, Steve.
You lazy so-and-so.
Yeah, get a job. Do something for a change. Well, I'm glad to hear that your soul has received balm upon its dryness. As dry as my brisket was, I'm sure.
Say more about that.
Oh man, I don't want to anymore. I've said enough. It was a rough day.
I am a big fan of the Christian Gonzalez brisket. I have partaken. I've enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it's capable of.
Yeah, this one was okay. It was actually better the day after, I thought. It was a smaller one, so it just cooked really quickly, and I was not expecting that. And when I went out there to deal with it, it was like, you're already like at 205, and that's just too hot for a little brisket. He can't handle that kind of weather. He doesn't know. He's just a little guy, you know. Poor little parentless, lifeless brisket
that I'm about to devour.
Lost both his parents and his life.
Lost both his parents to a sandwich.
Yes. Yep. I've probably eaten his parents, to be totally honest.
They were delicious.
That's actually horrifying to think about. Imagine if someone said to my children, I'm going to eat your parents.
That is
you're next.
That's a Benjamin Chang-ism from Community. Like, you need to be just
eat
like
your parents.
Well, do you remember the drug episode in like season 2 or season 3 where they're doing like when Pierce is like drugs on the stage adaptation for a bunch of high schoolers?
Oh yeah.
And Chang gets out to sort of disabuse them of their notion. He's like, I'm going to deep fry your dog and wear your face like a mask or whatever it was. And he's just going nuts. Like Ben Chang just being a nutty person.
Yeah. He's unhinged. Chang unhinged.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's who would say that to a brisket, I think.
Yes. I'm going to eat your parents. But what else we got going on? We're coming to the end of the season here.
Yeah.
Which is the best of times and the worst of times.
It is a time for reflection. It is a time for wrapping up. I mean, we are pop culture wise. So next week, actually, we're going to be doing our season finale with the girls. All 4 of us. Yeah. The Wonder Twins and the Headscarf Mafia are going to recombine their forces. And I think we're going to do it. It's going to be in the evening, not during the day on Wednesday because of our schedules for us all to be together. It's going to be like, I think 8:30 Eastern.
5:30 Pacific.
Next Wednesday. So we'll put a notice on social, but that'll be our last episode of the season before we take a break. We're doing Life is Beautiful, the classic 1990s movie about war and family and beauty and ugliness. So that'll be fun.
Because there's no better way to close out a season than by talking about some Nazis.
Tis the season.
Tis the season. Oh.
Yeah.
It's Nazi season, yeah?
We got topical.
We are hunting for Nazis? We shall find
because we did Jojo Rabbit a few months ago, which was really, really good. So
wait, did we ever do that?
No, we didn't. I just watched it and we talked about it.
You watched it. Yeah, we talked about maybe doing that.
Yeah. We should do that at some point. That was a good movie.
That's a great movie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've got plenty of stuff like The Bad Batch is out now. There's more Star Wars. I mean,
have you watched any of it yet?
Not yet.
Are you gonna binge it? Are you gonna wait till it all comes out and then binge?
Basically.
Steve, I'm worried about you.
You don't know my life.
You're right. I'm scared too. I don't ask questions because I don't want to know the answers.
That's fair. That is, and don't you forget it.
Exactly how many hamburgers have you eaten today? Enough of them.
I'll say I'm finished when I say I'm finished.
Yes, exactly. That is indeed when you would say that you were finished, is when you said that you were finished.
I can quit anytime I want. Yeah.
I just don't want to.
I just choose not to. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all. I make mine a triple. Thank you very much.
I is totally under control.
Let me just unbutton my top button and prepare for the fries. Nom. Anyway, yeah. So pop culture is coming to a close. We've got 3 more episodes of Be the Bee that we're going to do later this month. Small groups are going to end around Pentecost. I mean, everything is kind of coming to a close. Just for the audience, I shared you this earlier in Slack. We're putting together our 6-month, our semi-annual report for the Archdiocesan Council, talking about like all the stuff we did over the 6 months, and just doing the math. And it's like, we did 71 videos and, 25 podcasts and 21 weeks of small group materials and 44 presentations and retreats. And there's 719 people in effective Christian ministry now. And like, it's been a busy 6 months. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for most of it was just the 2 of us.
Just the 2 of us.
Yeah.
We can make it if we try. Just the 2 of us. Steve and I.
And that's why we need a break during the summer to regroup and think and plan and just figure out what we're going to do in the fall when we get ready for the new ministry year starting in September. So, because we've got ideas, but we also, I think, have to be honest about capacity. Like, Lord knows I need to be more honest about what I can actually bear on an ongoing basis. So
yeah,
we'll think about some stuff.
A little bit, Steve.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, good things are coming down the pipeline, hopefully. I'm believing that. We got some ECM stuff approved, which I'm really excited about. So
yeah,
more details to come on that.
Yeah, a teaser, because we can begin talking about this. Is we got a grant to put forward an effective Christian ministry cohort program. So we've talked multiple times about the course. I mean, I really think this is like probably the most impactful thing that we've ever done in terms of just like taking the questions that we've been asking about ministry, the vision that we have for ministry, and getting it out to people. And so what we're going to do is transform this online course into like a 9-month cohort curriculum where we're going to get to bring people together with a trained facilitator to go over the material and to plan like, what does this look like for implementing in your particular home or parish? And I mean, it's going to be like 2.0 level stuff, just have support from people, to have like this extended process to walk them through, troubleshoot, right? I mean, more details to come over the summer. We might do a webinar in June just to sort of announce what's happening, but that'll be something we launch in September, which is going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm pumped. Let's do it.
Yeah. So yeah, lots of big things happening. I don't know, anything else follow-up wise? You're good besides the brisket?
My littlest one turned 2.
What?
I know. She's thinking cute, man.
That she is.
It's a problem. We're gonna have a problem with that one for sure. She knows that she can just be like, "Can I have this, please?" And then she's like, bats her eyes, and we're like, "Yes." I love you, Daddy. I love you, Mommy. Like,
this is you
too.
Just wrapped around her little finger.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Many years to her. That's wonderful.
Yep. But that's it. Shall we onward?
Let's onward. What are we doing on this, the penultimate episode of the season?
On the penultimate episode of Pop Culture Coffee Hour, Christian and Steve take on the Mitchells versus the Machines. Yeah, that's the new Netflix original movie, which came out, I guess, maybe like 2 weeks ago, tops? I don't know. It's pretty new. Which I think warrants
a spoiler porg. You jamming out to the spoiler porg?
Yeah, we're just I'm trying to treat it like an air horn, like but I said it was like that was a terrible porg imitation. I'm sorry that I did.
It's okay. You're forgiven. In the light of the resurrection, all things are forgiven.
Yes, including bad porgs.
Let the audio listener know that Christian was moving his head to and fro in a rhythmic, semi-hip capacity as he was trying to sort of rock out to the spoiler porg. You know, just so you can, if you're not watching us right now, you can imagine what was happening. But anyway, yeah. So we are into new territory. If you have not watched the series, or the movie, feel free to pause or leave the live stream and come back to it. But shall we start with a quick little summary, as is traditional?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Please tell us how much you loved it.
I actually did really enjoy it. I did very much enjoy this movie. It was it had heart, it had humor, it had really wonderful aesthetics. But that's not what you asked. And again, in the light of the resurrection, I'm going to be obedient to what you're actually asking rather than being a jerk. So
yes,
I will
give me a raise.
Turns out empty pockets.
This is like when the kids come up to you in front of other people and ask you for something. They're like, "Can I stay here? Can so-and-so come over?" And it's like, yes, they can. And I would love for them to do that. This is like me asking in front of our live audience, "Can I have a raise?" I want them to hear it. I want them to.
This coffee's really good.
Yeah. How much did that cost?
I mean, if you average it out, like per cup, $1.50 tops, $1.25.
Well, maybe if you drank a little less bougie coffee, you could afford to give me a raise.
Here's the things that I can afford. I can afford cups of coffee and the occasional hamburger.
Maybe if you ate fewer hamburgers, you'd be able to.
Yes, that's where the budget is breaking.
Yeah, I knew it.
Steve,
knew it.
Your hamburger budget is through the roof.
Out of control. Also, I like the idea of it being out of your personal money. That's what that's where it happens.
That I'm paying you out of my personal money.
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, maybe if you made different lifestyle choices.
I mean, if I could afford to pay you out of my personal money, like, yeah, that would be a very serious lifestyle change.
I'm just kidding. This is mostly just to be awkward and uncomfortable.
Oh, it's working.
Good. It's very fun. Those of you who are listening live, go ahead and write in the chat or leave a comment on Pop Culture Coffee Hour, the podcast app, wherever you can, exactly what you think my salary should be.
You don't want to do that. You're going to have a bunch of like stingy people who are like,
$10.
Yeah. Annually. This content is worthless.
Oh, it's funny. This is funny to me. Because that is why we all go into ministry, is for the money, the bank.
It's for the cash money. It's true.
It is.
That's why I left Wall Street to go to seminary and start working for the archdiocese.
Exactly. I've been saving up for my third Tesla.
Yeah, I mean, My Teslas came in like the McDonald's Happy Meal, but
Yeah. Let's talk about my Teslas.
they're ironic t-shirts.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh man, you've got a hashtag going on the live chat. Christian wants a raise.
Yes, I hope it trends.
You're going to blow up social media. This is the next controversy in online orthodoxy.
Funny. Oh, this is funny. I hope it takes off.
There's a groundswelling. I mean, I support it too, to be totally honest. There's
hashtag
a groundswelling
Y2AM, hashtag Christian wants a raise, hashtag give this man a Tesla.
Hashtag Steve looks on awkwardly.
Yes. Should we talk about this movie now?
Yeah, I mean, we are behind the veil of spoilers, so you're sure. We've at least filtered out the people who don't know, who haven't seen the movie yet. So that's
exactly what we've been trying to do. Is give you time to go watch it.
Yeah. And that was enough time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, the Mitchells versus the Machines, which is a bit of a mouthful of a title, but whatever, it's accurate. It starts with some voiceovers, and it starts with a voiceover of a young woman named Katie Mitchell, who is a misunderstood and quirky teenager who wants to become a filmmaker, as many young people do, as I'm pretty sure Christian kind of wanted to when he was a young man.
Don't sass me.
So Katie Mitchell spends a lot of time making and watching movies because that's how she expresses herself, but it creates a lot of tension in her family, especially with her father, because the older she gets, the more she clashes with her dad, who loves the outdoors. He's a bit of a technophobe, so they really don't understand each other. And you kind of see their relationship progress, even though he clearly loves her and she very much loves him. There's just this lack of understanding as she gets older. Yeah. And that's the important thing to keep in mind. Like, they really do love each other. Like Rick and Linda, who are the parents, like they love their kids and they love each other and vice versa, but they just don't get each other after a while. And so what happens in the midst of all of this, they're going to drive her to school because she's starting college. She finally found her people at this like filmmaking school, but dad is like, hey, we're going to cancel your plane ticket and drive across country because it's like this one Hail Mary to spend more time with his daughter and sort of like heal the relationship, which, good instinct, maybe not the best execution, but whatever.
Right.
But what happens,
however,
is that
what led to the salvation of all of humanity.
It ultimately is, because as all of this is happening, the background against this is that this is, kind of the tech giant in this fictional universe is PAL. And PAL has this AI personal assistant, which is on everybody's phone, that they replace with these robots. And the artificial assistant apparently gets like jilted because the founder like throws it away in favor of the robots, and then hijacks all of the robots and tells them to get rid of humanity, basically. And so it turns out that the Mitchell family, the eponymous Mitchells who go against the machines, are mankind's last
also
hope.
Eponymous machines.
And the eponymous machines. Yes, that's true. Which machines? Those machines.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it. I mean, that's in a nutshell. And then spoilers, like they do save the world, but we'll get to that.
Actually, this would have been a more interesting movie if they were like, they didn't. Just kidding.
It was a tragedy.
And the machines win. Yeah. The machines win. Yeah. So this movie was great. I really did. I did love it. I thought it was very funny. It was just a blast to watch. And actually shockingly moving. So it was apparently like produced by the same guys who did the Lego movie, Phil Lord and Chris Lord and Phil Miller, whatever their names are. Those guys, which I've never seen, but I've seen enough clips of it to know that it operates basically at the same pace as this movie, which is just like nonstop.
Yeah.
But I also now really want to see the Lego movie. So yeah, I mean, the animation was fun. It had there's just a lot of different stuff kind of going on, styles that fit together well, and really kind of reminded me of like Scott Pilgrim versus the World a little bit. Like there was something very Scott Pilgrim-y about this whole thing. And I don't know exactly what it was, if it was like the animation style or whatever. And also
like that comic book sort of aesthetic that just kind of bumps into this reality and stylizes.
Are you familiar with the Oatmeal at all?
No.
Yeah, so the guy who is the illustrator for the Oatmeal, I don't think he was involved in this, but like sometimes it also reminded me of that particular like online web strip. So yeah, it was just the style. He's the same guy who did like the animation for that game Exploding Kittens. Like
yeah.
Yeah, he did all the art for that. That guy.
Cool.
So it kind of had that same moments, kind of like grotesque animation, but it's fun.
Yes.
Fun stuff.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Very fun, very aesthetically interesting. So if you're not familiar with Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the other movie that kind of comes to mind is like, do you remember the Spider-Man movie Into the Spider-Verse, which has this
So good.
like three-dimensional CGI, but then there's these like comic book elements that kind of highlight particular moments. Like, it was kind of like that, because this is a CGI movie. Like, none of this is filmed, none of this is real. It's all going for this kind of like textured three-dimensional look. But there are moments when something kind of like two-dimensionally happens. There are moments when like even a YouTube sort of aesthetic comes in, right? It's kind of like different elements of pop culture colliding together in this visual language. But very, very fast paced, very sort of nonstop, right? Lots of jokes, but also real depth. And I think really interesting, sympathetic characters who grow and sort of suffer together, and you come to know them because like they like we said before, they love each other and they mean well. And there's just this friction that's in the way of their love, and the resolution of all of that. Like, we don't need to understand each other to love each other, I think is particularly beautiful in a world where so many people don't understand each other. Right. There's something there. Very fun, very sweet, worth watching.
Definitely. Two thumbs way up. So let's kind of get down to to the nitty gritty.
Yes,
there's a Nacho Libre reference in case you missed it. It was a really bad Nacho Libre. Anyway, let's get down to the nitty gritty. And let's talk about family and belonging, because I think that this is a whole. This is like basically the backbone of this entire story, right? Is like where Katie fits and who her people are. And all of that kind of stuff, which, I think I thought was very fitting with just like some of the stuff that we've talked about with like what young people are needing, and kind of like maybe some of the reasons or part of what contributes to, I don't know, I said contribute like a very funny way. Part of what contributes to young people's mass exodus.
Yeah,
I appreciated. Contributes maybe to their departure and exodus from the church. So excuse me. In fact, this is one of the things in ECM that we've kind of we've talked about, right? Like, is this need to belong to the full community of the church, rather than simply just kind of like a youth group, right? Like, because even the way that she puts it is she's looking for her people. Right. Like, I'm not just looking for friends. Like, I'm looking for my people. I'm looking for the tribe that I'm a part of. I'm looking for
real belonging.
In a really meaningful way. Which for her, it seems like it just ends up kind of being about, at least she imagines that it's with someone who shares her interests. Right. Like, that's kind of what her idea of belonging is at the very beginning. Like, she's finally going off to film school to go be with her people because they're basically all just like her. Yeah.
Right. And that makes sense, right? From like a young person's point of view, because the tension that exists in the family is that she's into multimedia. She's into movies. She expresses herself by making movies. Her dad and the others don't really appreciate that. And so she feels like they don't get that about me. They don't get me. Therefore, my people are going to be the ones who get that. And who get me, and I can share that with, right? I mean, like, you can the reasoning tracks, right? It's
100%. I think 100%. I think that though it is an interesting thing here to be able to like because I think that we are in our like age of authenticity stuff and like being gotten. Like, it really does kind of end up boiling down in some ways, kind of, at least I think like on a surface level, we think that like we are our interests, right? Like we kind of have commoditized ourselves in that way. I am a Star Wars fan. I am a this thing. I am into whatever, right? Like, and only the people who think or feel that or are similar, like kind of end up becoming a place where we feel, oh, like that they get me, which is, I think is just I don't know, like it's interesting to me because I wonder if like that's part of even just like the political climate that we're trying to all navigate right now, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's no ability to converse across lines. Everyone's like
Yeah.
demonizing everyone else. Because at the end of the day, like everyone's just like vying for the same thing.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
No, it does. And I think like it is one of the, because the thing that kind of comes to my mind as we're thinking about this is, like what is chosen versus what is not chosen, right? Like she is looking for people who affirmatively share her interests, and she sort of wants to build a community with people. And so like it's she's going to this place. No one's born into a university. Like she finds this university, she applies, she goes. It's this like self-selected organization of people who are all very similar, right? And I think which is a good thing on one level, right? Like one thing that communication technology has allowed us to do is like we can find people that we agree with, and right on the positive side, right? You form these like little tribes, you form these like connections. But to your point about sort of like bigger picture, right? Like one of the things, the downsides of that is like it does kind of lead to echo chambers, and it does kind of lead to the sense that if you don't get along with people, you can kind of just disengage from community, right? Like,
yeah,
back in the old days, like my grandparents, right? Like when they grew up in a village in Greece and they didn't like somebody in the village, like too bad. Like that's your neighbor, you got to figure it out.
yeah.
And that's where like, it's interesting, right? Because like, do we define community by a shared level of agreement, and then we sort of build up on that? Or do we define community as like, these are just people who are part of our lives, and we have to kind of navigate the differences and disagreements that are sort of incidental to that, right?
Yeah.
Because the one is sort of like conflict avoidant. I don't get along with my dad, so he's not my people anymore. I'm going to go and find people who I get along with. And then when I don't get along with them, I'm going to go find somebody else that I get along with, right? And this constant sort of shifting sense of community as like this thing that is built around my wants and needs, wants and desires potentially, as opposed to community as just like this thing that challenges us, right? To come out of ourselves, because your dad is your community. Your dad is your people. And even when you don't see eye to eye with him, you've got to figure that out, because like, that's part of what it is to be a human and grow and develop the empathy to see things out of another person's eyes, right? And develop the ability to forgive, as opposed to, this consumeristic sort of sense where I'm building a world around on my terms, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're in some ways like you're kind of like bringing some things into perspective for me, right? Because like at the end of the day, what makes this family a family is their connection, right? Like connection is going to ultimately be the thing that wins the day, and brings us back and gives us space to wrestle and space to grow and space to whatever. But one of the things that's problematic for what's the dad's name? Rick?
Rick? Yeah. Rick Mitchell.
So Rick Mitchell and Katie, is that Rick is pretty concerned with like trying to make sure that Katie doesn't do anything wrong, right? Like in terms of like messing up her life or following the wrong dream or whatever. And so he's kind of always like trying to correct her, right? And like correct the family. Like, let's put our phones away and let's make eye contact and let's he's just trying to like kind of make people how he wants them to be.
Yeah.
Right. Which is understandable, because it's like he doesn't want them to be in pain, and he wants to be connected to them, but his way of getting that is to control things.
Yes.
Right.
It's like on his terms, right?
Yes. Yeah. Which is how he's trying to make the connection happen, which leads to the very thing that he doesn't want to happen, which is the disconnection. Right. Like it's pretty, it's ironic, which I mean, we all do that, right? The things that we don't want to happen, we do certain things and end up actually causing them.
Yeah.
Which is weird. But I'm wondering too, like if often we sacrifice connection on the altar of being correct. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like it's we would rather be right than be connected.
And I think that is a challenge for us as like Christians in particular, right? As like Orthodox Christians in particular, because so much of our self-understanding is like, this is the true faith, right? This is like the rightness that we have inherited from generations past. And we kind of design our systems and design our sort of like communities and connections around like that. as around community, right? I think we've talked about this before. I shared this example. Like I was at, I think it's relevant. I was at this like young adult gathering, and there was a person who was talking about Bible study, right? I think we talked about this on an episode before, and she's talking about like reading the Bible and how important it is, et cetera, and like you should be doing it in your spare time. And I thought like, yeah, that's all great. It's like, what about groups of young adults who want to get together to read the Bible together? Right? Like if it's good for me to do it by myself, like maybe Christian and I should get together.
Good for us to do together. Yeah.
Right. And she's like, whoa, that's when you want like to get a priest involved because you want to make sure whatever. And it's interesting that like, because my question was really like, what if we started building community around the scripture? Like it's good for me to do it in my own sort of personal time, but like, what if it's a thing that we did? And her initial instinct was like, well, like we want the expert in the room. And it's like,
why should I do it by myself? Yeah.
Yeah, right. The desire to be right in that sense actually directly conflicting with community, because like there's only one priest in a particular community. Like he's not going to be able to hang out with every group of friends that might want to like read the scripture together. It's just
right. Yeah, and that's what ends up being hard is that you end up then building a community around a particular personality, right? Yeah. And that's actually really dangerous to like begin saying like, well, we need to make sure that like, like Father's involved in everything, which isn't to say that we, that like we should just start doing whatever we want all the time, but like that's just not possible, like you're saying. And then it becomes like, well, when do we ever do anything? Like, can we have barbecues without him? Like, who's gonna pray for the food? Yeah, like who's gonna, whatever. Like, should we invite him over before dinner at everybody's house so that he can bless our meal? Sure. Like, I mean, like, where does that, kind of like priestly office, as opposed to the clerical one, where does the priestly office extend to all of us, right? So that we can all be kind of swept into really the one priesthood of Christ, right? Like that is, I think, which is where we're all unified, is in the priesthood of Christ. So like it always comes back to connection, like that element where, all things are headed toward him, and in him all things are complete. And, until as St. Paul says, Christ becomes all and in all. And like that is, that is a very important element to this whole thing of that, like the union that you get there. And not only to like, recognize like that's where we're headed, but that in trying to maybe even enforce uniformity actually does get in the way of union. It doesn't, we can't actually freely join ourselves to anything,
because real union is predicated on diversity. Yeah. Right. Like the union.
And I would say even sacrifice, right? Which cannot be compelled, right? Yes. Like sacrifice can't be forced. Like the, I came across this great quote the other day, about love and kind of like, you talk, I'm going to look for that book real quick.
Well, I'll say even about sacrifice, right? Sacrifice, the whole reality of sacrifice is predicated on the reality of the other, right? Like, it's not that I'm sacrificing for myself. It's that I'm sacrificing for you. I'm putting the interests of somebody else ahead of me. And like, that's where, this is again, where like the theology of the body comes in. Like we talk about the body of Christ, hands, feet, all these different things, right? It's one thing for the hands to sacrifice for the feet, as opposed to us being this amorphous blob where we're all exactly the same. Like, unity is impossible in that sort of place. Sacrifice is impossible for that place because we're the Borg, to use a dated Star Trek reference, as opposed to this group of persons who find our person in relation to each other. Yeah. We're more of a rebel alliance. Yes. Belated happy Star Wars Day.
We did it. It's because this is the quote that I came across. It's from Thomas Merton, who is like a Catholic contemplative. The beginning of love is the will to let those who love be perfectly themselves. Oh, wait, sorry. Let me start that over. The beginning of love is the will to let those we love be perfectly themselves. The resolution not to twist them to fit our own image. If in loving them we do not love what they are, but only their potential likeness to ourselves, then we do not love them. We only love the reflection of ourselves that we find in them.
Yeah, which is self-love.
Mic drop.
Right?
Yeah.
And I love the language of that he's talking about because I think that the issue that raises is wanting to mold people into our image and likeness versus, allowing people to flourish and sort of grow in their own time, in their own season, into the image and likeness of Christ, which are two very different things. Because we are not the center of the universe. Like, it's not like it's I can't be surrounded by people who are just like me and facilitate my meanness, right? It's an icon of hell at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, I mean, I think like you're that idea, right? That I'm not the center of the universe. It's funny. I was actually just talking about that with my wife this morning. Like that is a thing that we all, I think, say that we get. Like, I'm not the center of the universe, but like on a really kind of like intuitive level, we sort of believe that we are.
Yeah.
Right. And the way that we interact with everything, and even like, and I was thinking about this too. This doesn't sound really morbid, but it's not, because in the church, like, we're actually encouraged to like be mindful of our death, right? Like, to remember that we will die.
Yeah.
And my thought is, like, if we did remember that, then we would never delude ourselves into thinking that we were the center of the universe. Because if I am, then like the universe is going to go to hell in a handbasket the moment that I disappear, right? If I'm going to die and I'm the center of the universe, woof. But if you know what I mean? Like, everyone's screwed. Sorry, y'all. But if I'm going to die, then I have to accept the fact that I'm not the center of the universe, because one day all of this will just go on and I will not, which is like a really scary prospect, but then also becomes one that is rightly orienting if we let it be.
Yeah.
Right. And then that makes us kind of suddenly too feel, for me anyway, as I hold those two things together, right? I'm going to die. I'm not the center of the universe. That makes the compulsion that I feel to make others adhere to my mind less strong. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to figure it out for them, because like, I'm not the center of the world. Like, they can figure out, their own stuff. And would I rather be connected, or would I rather be correct? Like, that's the question that I end up being faced with, right? Would I rather stay connected, or would I rather be right? Yeah. And sometimes I've even asked couples that too. I've been like, would you rather be right, or would you rather be connected? And they're like, and they don't know.
Because it's hard, right? When you actually are faced down to it, because so, without getting too much into the weeds, right? Like, this connects even with the stuff that you mentioned, we were kind of alluding to earlier about kind of like our age of authenticity, sort of like postmodern way of approaching the world, right? Like, if it's about us being gotten by other people, right? Because like, we are ultimately like, we're the source and the standard. Like, what matters ultimately is like what I am into, what I think, the values that I sort of propagate, right? Like, it's good because I say something is good. It's good because I am into it, right? And that is kind of the underlying, assumptions that we make in our modern world, even though we don't say that, right? We want to say with a faux sort of humbling humility that I'm not the center of the world, but the way that we act, right? Especially when we create these shifting sort of voluntary communities that are constantly being shaped upon like my own whim and will, as opposed to something that is external to me and lasting to me. Like, that's a challenge, right? Like, love is a challenge, because love is not about just exploitation. Being constant is a challenge, right? Like, because it's not simply about me, right? It's sacrifice is a challenge, because it's not about what I can get. It's about what I can give. I mean, all of these things sort of break the ego down and realize like, there is a center, but it's not me.
Yeah. And like, it's that unitive principle of Christ, right? Like, that Christ is like the unitive one, in whom we are held together, and any connection that we experience is connection to him. Like, it just is, because that is one of his energies, right? Like, there is something too, I think, with Katie and Rick in that as well, right? Like, they can't necessarily fully get each other in like a cognitive sense, right? But they can embrace one another and be connected on a deeper level that is like a true participation in Christ. Like there is something to, like, look at us being, it is only by Christ that we as different people can somehow figure out how to love each other. Yeah. Because on a cognitive level, you make zero sense to me, and the things you're into make zero sense. But like, your personhood before me, I can experience and I can love and I can care for. And in that way, it's a participation in Christ, whether or not they realize it. Right. Like, It's
Yeah.
love.
Yeah.
Like God is love, right? So if love is there, then it's like they're participating. They may not be aware of that they're participating, but like it's happening.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Yeah.
you know,
And that reframes kind of a call, right? Because you think about like voluntary associations. And again, I'm not saying like it's bad that we sort of, hang out with people who share our interests or whatever it is. Like, I'm not saying that, but when we get to sort of decide who we interact with on a daily basis, when we get to sort of push people away because they're difficult or whatever it is, like that's one thing, right? We're choosing, but like in a deeper sense, right? Like God is the one who's calling us. Like he's the one who chooses us rather than we who choose him. And when we talk about the church as being filled with brothers and sisters, like, I don't choose you as my brother in Christ, right? Like God chooses you in a sense and sort of like puts our lives together. And then, like you said, right, the call is like to recognize the connection and to love in that connection, as opposed to being like, well, I don't want to love that person because that person's kind of annoying, or I don't want to love that person for whatever reason, right? Like it's like the connections are sort of given to us, and our task as Christians more often than not, right, is just to actually live into those connections with love, right? Like parents, your siblings, your neighbors, like so many people in our everyday existence, the hungry person, right? Who you turn a corner and you find them. Like you don't choose any of those people, right? But like the question is, okay, now what? You get to choose like whether you love that person in the moment or whether you want, a different association. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I mean, the sort of what I feel like you're speaking to is, like, I mean, with the eyes of Christ and the love of, so let me see if I can figure this out. Give me a second.
Okay.
Okay. So we talked about this before, that like the human superpower, right? Is to be able to cooperate and to stick together. Like that's what's helped us rise to the level of prominence in the world, right? Not our ability to kill each other. It's not war that's done that. Like it's our ability, which we're also really good at, by the way. But in a way that surpasses that even. Otherwise we wouldn't, because if we were more killer than cooperative, we would not have what we have. We just wouldn't, right? We would not be able to live together in neighborhoods. I mean, like nobody in my neighborhood has killed anybody as far as I'm aware of, like, or at least killed anybody in this neighborhood. I mean, we're all getting along pretty well in close proximity as strangers. We're not threatened by each other, so we're pretty much just primed to like, okay, we're going to trust people that we don't know. Like that's pretty much it. And thank God. Right. But so like this human superpower, let me see if I can explain this well, if I can link my thoughts well. So our ability to bond, our ability to cooperate, our ability to connect, to attach, to have all of these things, is kind of given like a what's the word I'm looking for? Like a turbocharge, right? With this hormone called oxytocin, right? And oxytocin is the thing that is released like when people are like cuddling or when moms are breastfeeding, and like this hormone is called like the love hormone, right? And what it does is it actually helps us bond with others. So it's what makes us go like, these are my people, right? Like we have these flows of oxytocin that are coming into our bloodstream and into our brains, and like we're bonding and connecting and linking. But as that happens, so oxytocin is this thing that makes us tribal, right? It goes like, you're my people, you're my people, you're my people.
Yeah.
The dark side of oxytocin is it's the thing that also makes us afraid of strangers, because the more we begin, because they're not in the tribe, right? And so this is why, like, if someone, I mean, this is what I've been noticing anyway, and I've wondered if maybe there's something to this with kind of like some of like the racial climate stuff, right? Is that we have like, we go to our, generally speaking, maybe this is a big, sweeping generalization or whatever. We go home to our, white neighborhoods. Most of the kids that my kids go to school with are white. Most of the people at my church are white. I would say actually probably like 99.999% of them are, at least visibly. And so I implicitly, right, like what gets put into my head is like, kind of like white people are my tribe, right? And if that's happening on a mass scale across the country or across the globe or across whatever, when we encounter otherness, our instinct, because of the oxytocin that we experience and this kind of like communal trend, is we think other, right? We feel afraid, we feel whatever, because it's just part of the natural mechanism of how oxytocin and attachment works.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? What Christ's body demands of us is to transcend our biology and to have everybody be in the tribe.
Yeah.
Which is why there's neither Jew nor Greek, male nor female. Like that we begin to transcend that and to include people of every tribe and every tongue and every nation and every whatever, right? So because now we're in the one tribe called Christ.
Yeah.
Like there is only one tribe. And we live into a great delusion when we experience different tribes or when we try to create different tribes. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Did I link that okay?
Yes. Yes, I
Okay.
think so. So
then
right.
what when we're at the right, when we're at the stoplight and we see that homeless person, kind of like you were talking about, we need to recognize, in some ways, have a shift that this is a member of our tribe, right? And like, if we had that awareness of like a member of our tribe living on the streets, I think we would be more like, what the actual heck is going on? Like,
how have we allowed this to happen?
How have we allowed this to happen? Instead of being like, that bum should get a job.
Yeah.
And we might actually be able to contribute to this, to the help and salvation of humanity, if we were like, how is this possible that one of our own tribesmen has landed on the streets? How is it possible that our tribesmen are killing one another? How is it possible? Like we just wouldn't, it wouldn't make any sense to us, right? We wouldn't understand war. We wouldn't understand all of these different kinds of things. They suddenly wouldn't make sense in the light of us all being one tribe. Like, why are we all killing each other and competing against one another? Like, it doesn't make any sense in Christ. When we understand that we're all one tribe in Christ, it makes zero sense. This weird competitiveness, right? The only thing that does make sense, and maybe I'm a little Pollyanna here about these kinds of things, right? But like, to recognize that this superpower that we have is actually been given for the salvation of the world.
Yeah.
You know, because we already have the mechanisms, but we just need to expand our tribe. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a long get back to that point, but I think I'm only just now kind of connecting that in my head.
Yeah. No, I think that's important, right? And like, there's a couple things that I want to add to this, because I think you did a great job of realizing like this is kind of the biology behind it, right? This is the hormone that at once facilitates attachment, but the dark side of that is like, these are the people who are in, these are the people who are out. As human beings, we just like, as a matter of fact, right? And I guess it makes sense from a sort of purely biological evolutionary point of view. Like, okay, these are the lines that we draw for the sake of survival, right? Because I can see how like thousands and thousands of years ago, when we were living in caves, like, these are the people that I can trust. I don't know that other tribe. They might club me over the head and take my food, right?
Well, see, this is what's interesting, is that like, there's a lot of evidence that shows there was a lot of nomadic societies. And so what people would do is they would intermingle with tribes and they would like swap people. So they all became one tribe. You know, and they were like, oh, these are our people. They're marrying each other. They're whatever. Like, we're all one. Like, hey, welcome to the whatever. Like, which is cool, because their tribes were intermingling. But when we have done this thing of like putting tribe, that's when war happens.
Yes. Well, and also think about even how the sense of tribe changes over time, right? Because it's one thing to say my tribe is my 150 families, right? Like on the hillside.
I totally thought you were going to say Instagram followers.
Oh, tribe in the very modern sense.
150 followers on Instagram.
They follow me for good content. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Right.
Right. But that's one thing, right? Versus like, my tribe is my neighborhood, which is a bigger tribe. My tribe is like my city. My tribe is my region. My tribe is my, like, even if you think about it, right? Like it's very natural, I think, like that the definition of tribe has actually expanded over time, right? Which is interesting.
I wonder if this is why Jesus was like, go out and make disciples of all nations. so that you don't start thinking that this is like a tribal thing.
Why he used the word nations in particular?
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like go out and include all of the people, right? Because like this is something that transcends boundaries and borders.
I mean, that's the promise from the very beginning, right? Like that's the promise that God gives to Abraham. You know, it's interesting, right? We actually like we sort of retcon what ancient Israel was based on sort of like what our modern understanding of Judaism and so forth is too, right? We think of it in very kind of like ethnic terms. But if you think about like who are the people, you know, Moses and the Exodus sort of happens, right? That initial generation like dies off, right? Who are the people that are actually allowed to enter into the promised land? It's two, right? It's Joshua and Caleb. Joshua, who is ethnically Judean, whatever you want to call him, and Caleb, who is not. So like even like the two people who are actually like the remnant of the Exodus, one is sort of like biologically on the inside and the other one is not. Like it's interesting. Even like the actual understanding of the covenant that God makes for us, like the promise that he has from the very beginning. It's not like a Christian, like, you know, Jesus took this narrow thing and expanded it to, like, it was there from the beginning. Like that was the point from the very beginning, you know? And we forget that sometimes.
My buddy calls it kind of like a soft Zionism. You know,
what do you mean?
That, like just that there's this idea of like, you know, that the Christians are like the holy state that like gets to kind of like be kept to itself and you know, rather than like this kind of thing that's expanded and kind of inclusive of all.
Because the point is everybody is supposed to be welcomed into the Christian family.
Yeah.
Yep. Right. That's the point, to go and make disciples, like you said, of all nations. Like that's the end game. The end game is that everybody is out there like following Jesus, loving God, loving neighbor. That's the point, you know? And
which is
sometimes
what it is to follow Jesus, right? Like that is what it is to follow Jesus, is to love God and love neighbor. Like,
right. Like that's the whole law.
Yeah.
That's the summation of the law. And yet, and this goes back to that sort of like community versus correct dichotomy that we started this, right? Like sometimes we actually prevent ourselves from welcoming people in because we are more concerned with preserving our sort of vision of correctness rather than welcoming them into this vision of truth, right? We're so off-putting and repulsive to other people sometimes because we are more concerned with, you know, the minor elements of the law rather than the weighty elements of the law. Like in the same way, right? Like it's interesting. I think like, you know, we have this sense that like Jesus recapitulates all of Scripture, right? Like he goes back, like he is the Exodus, right? He is like, you know, Pascha is the Passover, right? All of these things, like Jesus is sort of, you know, recapitulating in his life. And I wonder sometimes if like we as individual Christians sometimes like recapitulates the mistakes of Israel throughout the ages. You know, we're over here being like, well, I tithe my mint and cumin, right? And we're actually neglecting the weightier matters of the law, just like the Pharisees were, just like, you know, just like previous generations are more into
mercy and justice, right? Like, but what about,
right? But what about the Samaritan who's lying dead on the side of the road, right? Like, that's the community that I'm placing you into, and your call now is to love that person. Like but I got this mint and cumin that I got to take care of.
Yeah. Like the obsession kind of with those kinds of gains, like material gains, right? Like tithes and like that kind of stuff as the ultimate expression of what membership in the body might mean or look like. It's supposed to like you're in the tribe. How is it okay that we've let this homeless person become homeless? Like we should all be like, this is not okay. You know?
Yeah.
I remember at one point I was on a Yes trip with like, you know, with Katrina Vitar, who leads Yes. And she said something and it stuck with me forever. She said something like some like incredible number of people who spend the night sleeping on the streets. And it was, you know, let's just say it was 10,000. I'm sure it's more than that, but like,
sure.
Even that's too many, right? And she was like, 10,000 people go to sleep sleeping on concrete. That should make us mad, you know? And I was like, you're right. Like that should make us mad. That should be a thing that makes us mad, because how is it possible that we've let this happen? Mm-hmm. You know, it doesn't make any, like, who would let that happen to me? I don't know that it would ever happen to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like I'm surrounded by love and community, and I've got friends and family and whatever. Like, oh my God, you're not sleeping on the street. You're gonna come stay with us so you can like get back on your feet. You're gonna like so many people would jump like,
yeah,
of course, like there's some poverty of loneliness for sure there, that's like,
yeah,
how did these people fall through? God help us,
yeah. And that's the underlying sort of thing that's lacking, right? The other thing that's lacking is that sense of community. Like even when it comes to issues of like wealth and poverty, right? Like same thing for me. Like I think about it, like what would it actually take for me to end up homeless? Like it wouldn't just be like an economic catastrophe. It would be like literally every family and friend that I have not taking me in. Like that's really what it would take. Like that would be the last straw. If I lost my job tomorrow, if I went bankrupt tomorrow, like that would stink. Right?
Yeah. I got a room for you. Seriously, like that's it. It's like, no way that my buddy's ending up on the streets.
Yeah. And that's the piece that's missing. Cause like, I think even as a society, we talk about this like, oh, it's medical debt or it's whatever, which is important. And there are things to talk about, right?
Super contributive. Yeah.
But like, that's not really the straw that breaks the camel's back. I think the straw that makes the camel's back is like that person has no one, right? Again, assuming that there aren't like psychological issues, right? And a person is like willingly sort of like running from people, right? I mean, whatever, there's wrinkles to this, but I think the baseline question is like, does this community, does everybody feel like they are at least part of a community, right? As a question, right? And then the question for us, or the challenge for us as Christians, like, what does it mean to actually invite everybody into the one community, right? The household of God, like the actual family.
And I think it's important to note in like spiritual and material ways, right? Like you're part of this household, so you get a household. Maybe I've said this to you before, but I know this number. There's like 550,000 homeless Americans at any given time, right? There are 17 million vacant homes in America.
Yeah,
that's like 31 homes per homeless person at any given time.
Yeah.
And like, there's this big part of me that goes like, well, what if we just collectively decided that we, the church, were going to make sure that those people had houses? You know what I mean? Like we're going to just do that. That's going to be our initiative for the next 10 years is like to end homelessness in America.
Yeah.
Like I sort of think we could do it. You know what I mean? Like
we could totally do it.
Yeah.
How many Christian congregations are there? There's like 2,500 Orthodox congregations in the United States, right? How many Christian congregations are there in the United States? More than that. If every one of them on average is like, we're going to finance one apartment, right? Or one condo or whatever it is, right? One space, one studio apartment. Like, I mean, that's what a transformative thing that would be. Like, it's totally doable.
Yeah.
If you break it down in that way.
Yeah. It would be totally not difficult to do.
And I think this is actually like in God's providence, right? Maybe why we didn't do this conversation last week. Like this conversation actually really anticipates even the scripture readings for this Sunday. So, second Sunday after Pascha, the gospel reading is about the myrrh bearers and Joseph Arimathea and Nicodemus, right? But there's also the Acts, the reading from the book of Acts, which we're going to cover on 3 Men in a Bible later, which is about Acts 6, which is that the ordination of the deacons, that moment when the apostles are like, hey, some of the widows and orphans are not being fed, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
Right? Some of the widows and orphans are not being fed, and that's a problem because who are we? What are we? We are brothers and sisters in Christ. Mm-hmm. And if some of these brothers and sisters are not being fed, that's a problem. And then they have this moment where like, okay, it's a problem. We can't stop doing what we're doing in terms of the preaching of the word. Therefore, we're going to delegate this to the deacons. And that's when Stephen and the first round of deacons are there because like it's got to be somebody's responsibility or it's not going to happen. Yeah. And I think that's a challenge for us as contemporary Christians too. Like whose responsibility is it in like a very focused way? Like on some level, it's everybody's responsibility, but do we have sort of enough? Have we actually sort of like charged and empowered particular people, right? Like who are the deacons in our contemporary world? Like, yes, take our money and find that house, right? And buy that house and find the person and make sure that they're in the house.
Yeah. I mean, that's the hard question, I think, with all of this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, go ahead.
And there's one other thing that I'll say about that too. And so like, you know, we talked about this in Live the Word, which we did like 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, whatever it was, in the episode that we did on Live the Word. Like the way that that's presented in Acts chapter 6 is like the growth of the church stopped in that moment, right? Like disciples are being made, et cetera, et cetera. And then suddenly they realize, oh, the widows and orphans are not being fed. And like the Holy Spirit pumps the brakes. Yeah. And it's like, you guys got to figure this out. And then once the deacons are ordained, and once like Stephen and the other 6 deacons are doing their thing, then the conclusion of that pericope is, and then more people were coming to the word and so forth. And like, this connects to, again, to effective Christian ministry, to some of the needs that we've talked about, like to the extent that these are not needs that we're satisfying, to the extent that these are not things that we're doing as Christians, like, you know, because we complain about like people are leaving Christianity, right? Yeah. And the rise of the nuns and so forth. Like, how many widows and orphans are not being fed?
Yeah. Can we really maybe be that surprised? Our fault? Yeah. But, you know, and even like, like that's one of the things that I had long felt even about COVID, right? Was like, I feel like there was kind of, you know, the narrative that I've been hearing more and more is just like that it was kind of an inconvenience or an obstacle, or, you know, like that's more, I think, how people have been feeling. But early on, I remember feeling like it was an opportunity, right? Like this was a chance for us to like pause, reflect, kind of wonder, you know, about how we've been doing things and whether or not we should keep doing things that way.
Yeah.
You know, but every time I hear like, you know, and even like seeing it on like news reports of like people using the word normal, I'm like, wait, like that seems like a weird word to me now, you know, like we're doing things the normal way. And, you know, I see it all over the place. Like now that we're back to normal and like that kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what if normal wasn't great?
Yeah.
You know, like seriously, what if the normal that you want to get back to is not the normal that God has in mind?
Yeah.
Is there going to be another lesson that comes our way? Like, is there, I don't know. Like, I really do. I wonder about all of that kind of stuff. I don't know. I don't know that I want to go back to what normal was personally.
Yeah.
You know, like I liked things being slower. I liked, you know, things kind of cleaning up, you know, our sky's like brown again. It was so blue a year ago, you know, and now it's like, you know, all the dust is being kicked back up again because everyone's driving everywhere.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I get that we need to have, you know, things happening and businesses open and all of that kind of stuff, but I don't know. There's just a lot of questions that I don't know what to do with kind of facing all of that.
It's at least a confronting and sort of like facing and asking and working through some of these questions, right? Because even that instinct, I think, to just sort of get back to normal is very avoidant, right? It doesn't sort of evaluate what normal is. It's just like, because again, normal in the sense of like, this is the way things are, like the 550,000 people that you mentioned, right, who don't have a home in America, like that's normal. Is it though?
Yeah, right. That's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. Like, right. You know, like maybe we need to ask questions about that.
You think about the incredible level of like disconnection and loneliness and isolation out there, which we talked about this too. Like COVID didn't necessarily cause, COVID exacerbated and revealed, right? Like all these people who felt like they have no community, right? These people who are alone and are now turning to the internet because they have nobody else to turn to. Like, is that normal? Yeah. Should that be normal for people to be like, I have nobody and nobody checks in on me, nobody cares about me? Like, is that normal?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many of these kinds of things. I think that like I'm beginning to see kind of like these things that maybe don't make sense to me, kind of like contradictions of that kind of life, right? Like where we have like the gospel kind of calling us to like one thing, but then sort of feeling like in culture and in like our mind, and especially I think through the false god of politics, like we sanctify certain ways of being in the world, right? So on the one hand, it's like I feel like, man, there's just so many things. I'm not sure how this ties in, but because I might have been a little distracted because I was thinking about something while you were talking, and to be totally honest, so I'm sorry that
That's okay.
this is out of nowhere.
No.
Like, it's something that I've just been thinking through, right? That with the churches having been closed and like people not being able to go and masks being required, all of this kind of stuff, it's like, you know, like there's this just resistance against anyone like making me do something, right?
Yeah.
Which, especially like by force of by the use of force, right? By threat of force, like you have to do this thing, or like we're gonna come give you a fine, and we're gonna come whatever, and we're gonna shut your churches down, like all of that kind of stuff. Which I get, like there's the fear of totalitarianism there, right? Like I absolutely understand that, and I hear it, but it's like then it's like, don't tread on me, don't take away my rights, don't take away my freedom, da 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 da. But it's like then out of the same kind of breath, and I've seen this like I have like the Nextdoor app, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where people are like so upset and bothered by just various things kind of like in our area, in our neighborhood, and like the masks were being required at Trader Joe's and they can't make you do it. And they, first of all, it's not the law making them do it, it's free enterprise that's making them do it, which they're supposedly a fan of. So I don't really understand what the big deal, like, hey, this is actually just like free enterprise at work, like you should be totally supportive of what they want to do.
Businesses
right?
are doing
like,
this. Yeah.
Yeah. They're serving who they want to serve. Like why, whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's one thing, but they don't want to be forced to do that thing. But then they also are like, we should all call the cops to come take the homeless people off of our streets. Mm-hmm. So it's like, so we want to use the force, like the threat of force to get rid of all the yucky stuff that we don't like.
Yeah.
Right. But we resist the threat of force to do the things that we don't want to do. Does that make sense? But either way, it's like the threat of force is kind of like what I don't know if I'm making any sense. Instead of being able to like look at that with the same eyes that resist kind of the threat of force. Does that make sense?
So I think maybe the way to sort of like process it, because I get you, I hear you. Maybe a way to process this or think about this is like, this is essentially the mistake that like Rick Mitchell makes, right? Like he tries to sort of accept a world or sort of shape a world in his image according to his like wants and his desires. Like his daughter wants like movies and whatever. He's like, nope, we're getting away from our screens. We're spending outdoor time, whatever it is. Like, I think that is the baseline temptation that just we as human beings keep getting into, right? Like, no, I don't want you imposing your will upon me, but I'm totally fine to impose my will upon you.
Yes, totally.
Right. And and again, that when we actually think about these things, we expose the level of like inconsistent thinking at best, hypocrisy at worst. Like these are deep spiritual things that we all sort of struggle with. It's like, it's that Rick sort of mentality, right? Which is a very human thing, just writ large. And these are, I think, some of the things that we need to wrestle with, even that level of just baseline inconsistency, right? Like, am I more comfortable in a world that follows the rules that I want, as opposed to, am I going to push myself to actually like live in community and love and understand, sometime in ways that I don't want?
Yeah.
Because control is like, we all love control. We would rather make the world in our image than in somebody else's image, right? Because again, like, we say we're not the center of the world, but we frequently are the center of the world. Yeah. And I think these things are like, and this is where I think it's like, it's interesting as Orthodox Christians, right? Who are kind of like strangers in a strange land on some level. And this is the advantage of this. Like, we're kind of like, we shouldn't be tied into any of the existing sides when it comes to these things, right? We're like, we're kind of coming in and we're like, okay, that makes sense. That doesn't make sense. That makes sense. That doesn't make sense.
Literally everything should be open to critique, right? Like everything should be open to critique. And if it's not open to critique, if it's too big to fail, it's because it's demonic. Mm-hmm. Like, honestly, like that really is what it comes down to, right? If we're these outsiders, we should be able, and we know, we see the way, anything short of the way, we should be able to critique, right? Yeah. Like the way being Christ. Like, Christ is not open for critique. Right?
No, totally.
But
that becomes the challenge.
Anything else? Like, to me, it's like, anything else should be open for critique. Yeah. Like we should be able to say, like, is that really the way we should do that? Yeah. But if it's like, then it's like,
Well, and I
there's
think
some shadow side to this then that you're defending.
And I think to maybe even make this concrete, right? This kind of even goes back to the family dynamics that we see in the Mitchells versus the Machines beforehand, right? Because it's like when Katie is finally disenchanted and she wants to like leave home and find her people, like it's not a thing that happens in that moment, right? The normal for that family was actually broken for a long time. And so even like, it's like when Rick is like, oh, we need to spend time together and get on this, the road trip and so forth, like that dynamic had not existed since Katie was a child. Mm-hmm. Right? Like normal had been broken in that family for a long period of time. Like normal wasn't working for Katie. Normal wasn't working for mom. Normal wasn't working for whatever the brother's name was. And yet Rick is just very much like, we have to get back to normal because we're going to lose Katie and all these sorts of things. But like normal was broken for a long period of time. And I think kind of like to massage the point that you're making here, I think like all these things have to be evaluated in the light of Christ. Like it's not just like, I think there has to be a higher standard than like, it's just culture or it's just the way we do things around here. Mm-hmm. Like, because again, some things that we do like aren't necessarily the best, right? Like, like it's normal for like now for like little kids to have access to smartphones and have access to all sorts of really terrible things from like a very young age. Like that's normal. Should it be? Like again, like pick your normal. Like there's a lot of things out there that we should be talking about that we're not talking about because like it's like almost like we'd rather have the devil that we know rather than actually sort of like push the devil aside and be like, well, maybe we can build a society where people are more connected and more supported. And I don't know. I mean, we can't be like Rick in that moment. Like normal wasn't working.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that what people resist is like the singularity of that, right? Like they don't want to like just be plugged into a system where they're forced to make things happen, which I also get and like kind of affirm, like I don't think we should force anyone to do anything. Yeah. Like I don't see Jesus forcing me to do much of anything. Does he force you to do stuff, Jesus?
He's persistent with me a lot of the time, so I'll give him that.
He pursues, but like he's not like,
no, he doesn't force. Yeah.
Like I'm going to tie you up and beat you over the head until you get it right.
Yeah. He's never tied me to the train tracks like a supervillain.
Yeah.
Twirling his mustache. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just interesting to me, like the freedom that God gives us is so much greater than the freedom we give one another. Mm-hmm. It just is. And, we're so hell bent on that kind of like, we got stuck on this idea of like being correct versus being connected. But I think it's worth it to stay on that. Cause I do think that's like a big thing throughout this whole movie. Yeah. Right. Is like, is it more important to be correct and do this thing the right way, to live the right kind of life, or is it more important that you're my daughter?
Yeah.
Like those are the questions that a dad is faced with.
And when you lead with connection, right? Like that's actually how this false dichotomy begins to break down, right? Like it's a classic example, the woman caught in adultery, right? Who comes to Jesus as the people are about to stone her, right? And they ask her like, what do you do? Right. And he draws in the dust, right? And like he who is without sin cast the first stone. Like he saves this woman and he establishes his connection with her. She gets up from the dust and she looks around and she's like, where are the people who, Jesus asks her, where are the people who pursue you? Right. I don't pursue you either. Now go and sin no more. Right. And like he can lead this woman into a correct mode of life once this connection with her is established.
And even that is like for your own sake. You know what I mean? Like it's like nobody's condemning you, right? Like no one's like, but it's like for the love of God, lady. You know what I mean? Like, like don't find yourself here again. This is not a place you want to be. Yeah. Not like I said, like you're not in trouble. No one's in trouble. You're not like, but for your own sake, like don't walk this path anymore. Yeah. Which is not, again, like because it's right. Right. But it's because I love you. Yeah. And because I want what's best for you. Yeah. And
because I want you near me. Yeah. And this, you're right. And like, and a life of sin is drawing you away from me. Right. Like, I mean, that stoning is this sort of like visual manifestation of what's happening to your heart. Like, you're leading yourself into destruction and death. I don't want that for you. So were those people. Like, they weren't the righteous ones in this story by any stretch of the imagination.
They were willing to kill you. They were going to murder you.
Yeah. Right. But it's like, and it's interesting again, like this healing sort of starts in this reestablishing of connection, which I again, like, I think as Orthodox Christians, right, we talk about like the church as a hospital, and we talk about sin as illness, and we talk about it all these ways, right? But like, if we actually believed what we said, we would approach a lot more interactions. I feel like Jesus approaches that interaction with the woman, right? Like, I think we're much more interested at like wagging our fingers at people. We're much more interested at creating our own little silos and our own little tribes and so forth. But he gets down in the dirt with her, and he's like, I don't condemn you either. I love you.
Because it's back to that thing of like, I'm in, they're out. Right? Yeah. Like, I'm in, you're not. Here's other ways that you're not, you know? Yeah. And here's other ways that I'm not. Yeah. You know? Well, I don't do XYZ, and I don't, you know? Yeah. We love to point out all the sins that we don't struggle with. No. But.
And that's the thing, like, as Christians, right? We are known as this judgmental people who condemn the world, as opposed to these like repentant people who condemn themselves. Yeah. First and foremost. Again, we say like, I'm chief among sinners, but I doubt very much there are a bunch of non-Christians who would be like, yeah, the problem with those Christians is that they're too humble and they focus on their sins too much.
Yes. Yep.
You know, like these are challenges for us.
Mm-hmm. They're always talking about what they've done wrong.
Yeah. Right? I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. There's it's funny. We took one tiny aspect of this movie and there's a lot of stuff to chew on.
Went a long way with it.
Yeah.
So why don't we close it up then? Because we're at time here.
We didn't touch anything in our outline.
It's fine. It's fine. So I think the best way for you to probably go with this for us is, why don't you close us out with Philanthropy Hour today? Sure.
So a fun little spotlight, right? We've been trying for the last few months now to just highlight a particular initiative or a particular group that's really been just living out the call of the gospel to care for people, again, in these very practical, sort of tangible ways. Today, I want to shine a light on the Orthodox Christian Mission Center, which I think is, again, to this point of going out and preaching the gospel, expanding the sense of community. It's really something that OCMC has been doing. You know, Christ's last words to the apostles were, go into the world and preach the gospel to all nations. And since 1987, OCMC, the Orthodox Christian Mission Center, has sent missionaries and mission teams to work, worship, and witness around the world. And, you know, you think about the revival of Christianity in places like Albania. You think about the resurgence of Christianity in places like Guatemala, in places like Kenya. Like there's a lot of really amazing missionary evangelical work that the church is doing around the world. If anything, we need to get better about our missionary outreach, like here in our neighborhoods as well. But like, glory to God, like it's happening. And this is a way to express love to people, right? That they are worthy of receiving the gospel. The gospel is not a thing that we sort of keep to ourselves, but the gospel is a thing that is meant to be shared. Like the fact that I care enough about you to share the gospel with you is actually a sign of your worth and how much I love you, right? And even that kind of goes into this, you know, this posture versus the openness posture. But if you're not aware of the Orthodox Christian Mission Center, they do wonderful work. You can find more about them at ocmc.org. You can support a mission team. There's definitely ways to be part of their really transformative work around the world. ocmc.org. Check them out. If you've ever felt a calling to missionary work yourself, definitely connect with them because they're preparing teams to send to Sweden. They've got, again, they're all over the place and they're doing really wonderful stuff by God's grace. ocmc.org.
Amen. You know, let it be blessed.
And that's it.
Good things. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And next week, like we said, it'll be 8:30 Eastern on Wednesday. It'll be our season finale. We'll be talking about the classic film, Life is Beautiful. The girls are going to be joining us, so we'll have our full panel as we wrap up the season. And I guess that's it for the time being.
We did it.
We did.
Peace, y'all.
Yeah. Bye, everybody. Christ is risen.